I'm Alexis. I'm a Russell Free Eagle High School. These are my teammates. You're listening to West Data Podcast.
You'll hear parents and students say all the time, well, I have test anxiety.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure everyone has test anxiety.
Everybody has well, some people have interview anxiety.
Podcast
anxiety.
Exactly. Like, what are we doing here?
I don't know who that could be.
Right. So you have those situations that you run into in life, and so we have to teach them that's the whole child kind of thing that we're talking about. There's more to it than just the test.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the West Ada Podcast. And today, everyone buckle up. We're talking testing.
Testing, assessment, achievement. It's really, you know what? I think that was kind of our attitude before our conversation.
Yes.
And then you'll get to hear why it's such a cool thing that it really serves our kids and our teachers well.
And it's a collaborative effort. There's all these things, but we are joined by a couple of really interesting guests. Kelly Davies has been with West Ada for 31 years.
Yes,
and
she is committed to our district. And Dave Harrison, 21 years in the district, and both of them coming from classroom teachers into this district assessment and achievement role. And they really are doing great things.
Well, I do think it's, we always say we're parents. I think it really is easy as parents, and you all listening or watching, it's easy for us to not understand all these different iReady and all the different tests. So anyway, we're glad that you're here. This is going to be hopefully a great conversation for you to understand how your kids test and how their assessment works. Like I say, we're glad you're here.
Yep.
Enjoy.
Okay, well, we have the pleasure of speaking with two of our awesome colleagues today from the assessment and achievement team. We have Kelly Davies and Dave Harrison. Welcome, you two.
Nice to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I always hate testing anxiety, but I'm going to be okay. I promise.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and be okay.
Right, just talk yourself down. You can do this.
It's going to be okay.
It's going to be
Yes, it's going to be okay.
Why don't you two share a little bit about your backgrounds? Kelly, you've been with the district for a few decades.
31 years.
Yeah.
I started as a teacher at Meridian High. Before that, I was at a different district, but was a teacher at Meridian High. And while I was there, I taught math and some computer stuff. And then I became an administrator at various middle schools and a principal at Lewis and Clark. And I've been in this job for the last 4 years.
So cool.
Awesome.
So cool. Well, and Dave, your background, you were telling us off air about starting in the Air Force, and so you've done a bunch of different things.
I've done quite a few things in my career. I was in the Air Force for 4 years. I really enjoyed that time, but quit to go to Micron. Was able to work in their research and development fab, which was kind of cool. I'm a little bit of a nerd, and so, which is why I enjoy the work that I do now. But I've been in the district for 21 years. Started as a second grade teacher, did that for 8 years. Then moved to first grade, because I needed a change. Loved first grade, had an awesome year, was looking forward to the next year. And then a job in the assessment department came along. And so I couldn't really pass that up. I've always, wanted to end up being in the assessment department. So
that's cool.
Okay, this is super interesting. So Air Force, Micron, second grade teacher, first grade teacher, and then assessment.
Eclectic,
super eclectic. That's interesting. I love that.
That's very cool. Well, Kelly, I would assume that being in achievement and assessment is vastly different than being in a classroom. Is that fair, or is it? You're still obviously dealing with kids, but how different is it?
Well, working at the district office and not being held down by the bells.
Oh,
you have a whole different work-life balance there.
You can eat lunch when you want.
That's right.
Go to the bathroom and do all
those
the
important things.
Yeah.
But really, the work we do supports the work that happens in the classroom, and so I feel pretty connected to what's still going on, and really we are caring about how our students are doing and succeeding and.
That's cool.
And all that. So it's all related.
Well, I think it's super important that you both were classroom teachers, because that's who you're trying to help our students, right? And so you need that experience to know what it's really like to be in their day in and day out, and how data can really affect one's teaching practice, right? I assume that's kind of what we do with data is inform our practice.
Absolutely. And it's not just, I think, that what people think of as spreadsheet data. I think we're thinking about all kinds of data. So you're, talking with the student and you're hearing from them how they're doing. And that's just as important as the, state assessment score that comes in. So you're looking at every single piece of data that you're getting from students in the interactions you have in the classroom to ensure that you're kind of on the right course of action for helping them be
going
successful.
down the right lane,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it might be helpful, Dave. Maybe you can kind of give an overview of what assessment is. Like Kelly mentioned, data can be a bunch of different points. Like, what does that look like holistically for our teachers in our district? It's not just the iReady or the ISAT.
Sure. That's the thing with teaching is they're assessing all the time. Everything that teachers do really is designed to assess learning, whether it's, activities that students are participating in, conversations that they're having in the classroom, the discussions they have, what they're observing. And so it really is, when we talk about assessment, we try to move away from the word test. Right? It's not about just giving a test.
Yeah.
It's about everything that we look through the lens of how are students doing and performing academically, behaviorally, socially, in all of those areas to really get that whole picture of what students are able to do, to make decisions on, because we are here to improve student learning, and all of those are kind of parts and pieces.
Yeah, gosh, teaching is so complex.
There's
I
a
think
lot going
people do
on.
not realize how much
There's a lot
goes into
going
teaching.
on. Yeah. Well, and Kelly, for you, I mean, how does that shape the way you go about testing and assessing? I mean, you alluded to it earlier, but it's all about helping the kids go from A to B. How does that help you assess where kids are?
Well, I think we want them to be part of that process. And so we really talk about being an assessment capable learner. And what we mean by that is that a student knows where they're starting and where they're wanting to end, and they can really decipher where they are in that learning journey so that they can know, okay, I'm here, now what's next? Because we never really get to a destination with learning. We get to stopping points, but there's always new learning as we keep, moving ahead. And so as we create those assessment capable learners, it's about visible learning. It's about making that journey real visible for them, and also making it visible for us, not just as classroom teachers, but as a district. Where do we want them to start, and where do we want them to go next? So
that makes sense.
It's really all of us being on that continuous improvement cycle.
How might that look, in the lower levels, like maybe, first, second grade? How does that look in helping them be an assessment capable learner versus a high school student? What is that continuum kind of like?
Well, I think it can be similar. If you walk into some elementary classrooms, you'll see displays on their bulletin boards that show kind of this is what your writing might look like today, and this is where we want it to end up. And kids can go back, and actually in some classes they have students doing that, going and identifying where they are on that path. In high school, I can speak for middle school because I was there most recently. You will see the progression of learning described in kind of steps. So as students are starting a unit of study, they know that this is where I'm going to end up. And then the teacher, through their learning intentions and success criteria, really define that process so students can communicate where they are next. And I think those are good questions. My parents used to always ask, did you have any homework? And we really encourage that question to be different. What are you learning? What are you learning next? So we can kind of change the conversation a little bit about, it's more about what I'm learning as opposed to what grade I'm getting or what's the next day for the test.
Sure, kind of shifting the focus or whatever.
On learning. Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, and Dave, I would have to think that given all that, it's really important for us to communicate with parents, teachers, students. Everyone kind of has to know what page we're on. How important is communication?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge part of the role of assessment and supporting students. Is the students need to know where they're at. But also parents do, and that is a challenge sometimes that we face when parents don't understand what the test scores mean. If we talk about state assessments and they get a report that comes home. And so we really, it comes to the teachers having comfortability in being able to speak to parents about what the score means, what is it telling us about, their child's learning, what are the next steps, as Kelly mentioned. Those are conversations that are going to happen at the building level with the teachers. That's, those are who the parents go to. They don't usually come to us to tell, to ask what this score means. And so, we can support teachers in having those conversations, being comfortable with that. We talk about assessment literacy, really understanding, what an assessment's role is, what is its purpose, and then how does it, support us. and being able to speak to it. And that should be the role of everybody in our district, from district down to building leaders, to teachers, to students, being able to speak to it.
So I would imagine that's some of what our PD looks like, right? Like I would assume your team helps our teachers know which kinds of assessments are going to inform their practice, and then how to, what did you say, assessment literacy, how to kind of decode those results. I'm a West Ada parent. I get the emails and then I tell my kids, like, oh no, you're approaching grade level. You need to try harder. Like, did you take this test seriously? Did you really try to show what you know? Or are you just checking boxes? Like that kind of thing. So I would assume that you're in there helping our teachers be able to do that.
Well, and I think that when we team with the curriculum department, because it's all just interwoven, curriculum, instruction, assessment, and reporting are all kind of the pillars of what we have to do in order to meet the needs of students. You said earlier how complex the job is, and it is complex. And so there's different kinds of assessments for different things. And we recognize just the importance of those classroom assessments in the process, and whether those are tickets out the door or they're homework assignments or question and answer discussions in the classroom or just working one-on-one with students, whatever that is, that data is collected by student and teacher and hopefully communicated with parents so that we can confirm what they know with those state and district assessments. So my evidence in the classroom shows me this. On the state assessment, they're showing me that same thing. And so here's the areas that we can improve, and here's the areas of success that we can celebrate.
Well,
interesting, yeah.
And you mentioned that it's so much more than just a test, right? There's different kinds of assessments, and just, I know there's formative and summative and things like that. What are all those kind of pieces that are going into, like you said, a test in the classroom, maybe an assessment or test in the classroom, and then a state standardized test, and then maybe what the teacher anecdotally is seeing and observing and taking notes on? Is that kind of a big picture that our teachers take into consideration when reporting this stuff out, or?
Oh, we certainly hope so. Yeah. For sure.
Yes. That's definitely the goal, right?
Okay.
We never want to make a decision on one test score. And so everything should be through the lens of what data do we have from the classroom level, from the work that the student's able to do, to the formative assessments, and the summative assessments. And, as Kelly kind of mentioned earlier, those assessments should help confirm what we know about student learning. And if they don't, then it allows us to kind of evaluate what is it, that we need to address right then. So that we can continue to support students ongoing. So all of it becomes necessary in the picture of students.
Well, I think as a parent sometimes too, especially when my kids were younger, I didn't understand, and so maybe you can shed some light, but what we can do as a district versus what the state requires versus what the national government requires. How does that work? Can you all, Kelly, add a little more to that in terms of like what West Ada can do versus what the state can do?
Yeah, like maybe break down what all those different
assessments.
Yeah.
So we obviously have classroom assessments and the formative assessments that happen in the classroom, the common formative assessments, which happen between like grade level teachers make those decisions on what those assessments are. And then our district has decided to put in the iReady diagnostic test, because what that does, and I think you answer this better than I do, so I might just pass it on to you, about the health of our system. Go ahead.
Excuse me. Caught me off guard.
Sorry. Speak about iReady right now.
Yeah. Well, we do talk about, the role, the purpose of assessment is really to measure student learning and support students, identify what their needs are. Sure. But we also realize that it does have another role, which is to gauge the health of our system when we talk about our curriculum and our instruction. So those district assessments, those state assessments really do allow us to kind of look at how are we doing in relation to state standards. When our curriculum is written by our curriculum department, is it aligned to those state standards? Are we really teaching what we think we're teaching to the level that we should be teaching it at? And so our curriculum, we look at it through those lenses. Then we look at our instruction, the instructional practices, as you talked about earlier, the professional development that teachers get. And so some of those in that professional development, they learn about instructional strategies to employ in the classroom. And if we don't look at that district data, the state assessments, sometimes we can be missing the mark because we think that we're doing something, well, or that's making gains, and we realize that it's really not. And so it does allow us to gauge also not just how are students doing, but how are we doing as a district in curriculum and instruction as well.
And I think, we've said that assessment serves so many purposes, and there's definitely the state accountability purpose. That's why the ISATs, that we take those because the state requires us to, but we really want our focus to be on what does it tell us about our students and our instruction, because that's where we're going to be able to make the difference.
Sure.
Those are the questions that we can begin to answer. As opposed to it being a summative, just a percentage that's reported. We want to look at that student by student.
Well, and sorry, go ahead, Katie.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I feel like parents may be most familiar with iReady. I don't know, just having kids, I feel like, my sons have needed maybe some extra help in English or math. And then they'll work on some iReady, and it's kind of diagnostic, and then it'll kind of progress up with them, right? That's iReady. They can do that at home, kind of throughout, and then the teachers can also use that in the classroom, right? So it can be like a diagnostic tool, and then also like a extra help tool.
So we use the diagnostics K11,
okay,
and it is our curriculum resource for math and reading in K through 5.
Okay.
We do have instructional licenses at the middle school level and very few at the high school level. We have different programs and curriculum there.
Okay.
So if you have a secondary student, you're going to see maybe a little less of the iReady as a curricular resource, but it does measure end-of-year standards. So are students meeting the end-of-year benchmarks for math and reading? And so at the beginning of the year, they may score one grade level below, and that's kind of what we would expect at the beginning of the year because they haven't seen that year's worth of curriculum yet. Right. So if they're
Oh, so I should be nicer to my kids.
Yes.
Yes. I'm always like, what is wrong with you?
Sure.
Get it together.
Don't do that, for heaven's sake. Yeah.
By the end of the year, you want them to be early on or mid or above. Yes,
Okay,
for
good.
sure.
Yes.
No.
Not now.
Oh,
They
my
don't need
poor
to be right
boys.
now. They don't need to be right now.
It's game time for a great cause. Help your school take the top spot in Hoops for Hunger by raising funds to eliminate school lunch balances for families in need. Elementary, middle, and high schools will battle it out to win prizes, raise money, and make a real difference in students' lives. Whether it's spare change or a generous donation, every penny counts. Make sure to include your school's name with your donation to boost them on the leaderboard. Let's score big together and ensure all students have access to the meals they need. To learn more, check out the link in today's show notes.
So assessment, testing, things like that. Our kids are so much more than widgets, right? We can't just test them and say this is a standardized test. There are other factors that go into that, like, home factors, environmental factors, social emotional needs. How do we kind of take that into consideration in our system?
I think one of the things that we always say is that the data actually just starts the conversation. Right. And, you have a spreadsheet of data. Well, that's not answering all the questions that you need to answer.
Of course,
you
sure.
want to drill down, look at it student by student, and then not just let the number speak for it, but then ask the teacher for the input. What are you seeing in the classroom? How's the student responding? What's going on? Why might there be a reason that there was a dip in their understanding? Maybe they were out sick.
Right.
And so on this particular assessment, they just weren't ready. And that doesn't mean we need to be retaking all sorts of assessments. It means we are using all of the different data about who the student is to help them on their journey. And if that is helping them with some other sort of need, a social emotional sort of need or a behavioral sort of need, then we're going to help try to address that so that we can get to the learning, because ultimately that's what we're here for.
Makes total sense. Well, David, I love the fact that you spent time in the first and second grade rooms or whatever. I mean, you all don't do what you do without loving kids.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the cliche.
We love them at high school too.
Well, no.
Not necessarily
They're
middle
fun.
school.
No, middle's just fun too.
I've got
They're
a high
all
schooler
fun.
at home. Yeah. Well, but I mean, but your past life as teachers, how does that help you or help form how you do your job today?
Well, it definitely keeps it in perspective. Right?
Sure.
That behind that number is a child, is a student, right? There's a human being behind it, and we really do have to look at all aspects that do go into that. And so, one of the things that we really appreciate about our district is the collaborative nature of it. When we talk about social emotional, support, behavioral, the departments that we have that can support, the teacher conversations that are happening in the building, because it's not just even a teacher saying, well, this is the score I got, I need to drill down into it. It's a team effort. It's an approach, through collaboration of let's bring in, the counselors and the nurses and the administrators and, the grade level team, to have those conversations and really kind of dive into. So we really are very supportive in that way through the collaborative model that we have in our district.
That's really good.
And something I think it might be important to circle back to, because I don't think we finished our thought. The iReady is what the district used to measure what we're doing with our curriculum in-house. And then we kind of match that, maybe not match up the right word, but ISAT, IRI, those are the state required testing.
Yes. Well, and sorry, can I just jump in real quick? As a parent, it's so easy for me to get confused, like ISAT, iReady. I mean, all the different terms.
Lots of I's.
Everything starts with an I.
Oh my gosh, it's really easy as a parent to get. So that's
what I'm trying to do, like lay it out. So then we have state level,
right?
Yes.
And then do we have? I'm familiar with NAEP. I don't know if that's something. Is that a specific test our kids take, or because NAEP's a national thing? Right?
It's a national assessment that 4th and 8th graders take.
Okay.
And so it's just kind of a sampling. That is a federal, assessment of, to look at how we're doing, in the nation in ELA and math. Not all 4th graders and 8th graders take it in our district. So it is really just kind of a small sampling. The State Department picks specific schools, specific sites to test.
Interesting. I had no idea how that worked.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the IRI and ISAT. When did those, because those are certain grade levels, or are those every year?
Yeah, they are every year. ISAT is the end of the year assessment. So its purpose is really to measure student grade level performance on grade level standards.
Okay.
Sure.
Excuse me. And so it's grades 3 through 8 and 11th. And we measure ELA, math, and science. Not all of those grades take the science test, but we are measuring those 3 contents, looking at how students are performing. But it really is a grade level standards assessment, and so the State Department looks at that. How are students doing in relation to the grade level standards? It doesn't necessarily, like you said earlier, iReady. Students can progress, higher in different grade levels. They can move up. They can get harder content and be assessed on kind of more rigorous content. With the ISAT, it's pretty much kind of fixed in that it's grade level. The IRI is our kindergarten through 3rd grade reading assessment. And it has a purpose, just like the ISAT, in that in the spring, we're measuring how students are performing in relation to reading standards for their grade level. But it's also given in the fall, and it acts as a benchmark, which is really nice because it allows us to see where students are at the beginning of the year. And then we can use that to measure growth, because we can compare fall to winter or fall to spring. And then the IRI, the assessment itself, not the IRI, but the assessment that we use for the IRI, we're fortunate that the state contract allows us to also use it monthly as a progress monitor. And we know that teachers are going to be assessing reading skills anyway. And so we choose in our district to use that as our measure. It allows us to have that consistency in what's being measured. It allows us to, students to have that familiarity with the platform. So when you start talking about state tests and they're high stakes, and we hope that by doing that, it allows students to be familiar and therefore it's just comfortable.
Right.
All right, which then allows them to really demonstrate what it is they know. And we can use that data on a monthly basis to see how students are progressing in their reading skills. So.
And to kind of, that was the model. Having been in middle school for a lot of years, we always looked to IRI oh my goodness, they have all this data all the time to make really good decisions for students. And so as a district, that's why iReady is done in the fall, winter, and then for some grades in the spring. So the grades that do the iReady in the spring are grade levels that don't have the ISAT. Some schools still follow through with the iReady in the spring just to see that continuation, but it really allows us that progress monitoring to see if we're on track with where we need to be. And if we're not, then what kind of adjustments can we make in a timely manner instead of waiting for that end of the year number to say, oh, goodness, we missed the mark on something, right?
Yeah. Well, I know we've already touched on this, so I'm being a little redundant, but all these different assessments, how does that complement what a teacher is doing on a day-to-day, boots on the ground kind of level? Can you speak to that?
I think that, if we are teaching the priority standards and our curriculum, then, and that's what these assessments are measuring, then they answer the questions if what we're teaching in the classroom matches what is expected for students in that grade level to know in terms of math and English and science.
Gotcha. So if something's off, alarm bells start going off, and you're like, oh, hold on, we need to have a course correction or something along those lines.
And it used to be, they call it the educational lottery, like the teacher next door may be right on point, and I'm teaching my famous, dinosaur lesson that really doesn't have to do with the curriculum. There would never be really any measure of that until, say, the end of the year when my students weren't exposed to the curriculum that they needed to be able to advance to the next grade in a reasonable way.
Sense. Okay.
And so this just holds us all accountable. So it's the health of the system that you were talking about, and just making
it gives
sure
us some
that
guardrails.
And we're responding appropriately to students and making sure they're ready for the next grade. It's kind of our guarantee. My promise as a 5th grade teacher to the 6th grade teacher that I've taught them what they need to know so they're ready for the content.
To move on.
Yeah.
Okay. And there are times when we get questions from teachers about how what they see in the classroom doesn't align with the assessment. They do much better on my classroom assessments than they are on the IRI, and so there's something wrong with the IRI. And it really kind of, gives us an opportunity to stop and say, well, let's take a look at the level that your classroom assessments are written at. Sometimes it's your protocols, your process that you do. The IRI has built-in timing components. So are you administering your assessment in the same way? Are they timed like they would be on the IRI?
Sure.
We're measuring automaticity of reading skills, and if you're not measuring them through a timed component, right, then you're not really comparing, the same thing. And so it does allow us to kind of have those conversations and look at, just sometimes the process that's being used on a classroom assessment when they say, well, the IRI doesn't give me the same results as my classroom. My students do better in the classroom than they do on the state test.
And if we know that they're measuring the standards and our students are not able to transfer that knowledge from one platform to another, then we have to question whether or not they're going to be able to transfer it to the next, the more advanced skill level. And that's really ultimately what we want to do. It's not that they can just read or do math from a textbook. It's that they have to apply it in a real life situation. And so,
have you really learned?
Can you do this without my teacher voice attached to it? Because kids they can respond a lot of times to the way the teacher says it, but then when they see it in written form by somebody else, then it's it's mystery, and we need to be able to help them have that independence with the content.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense.
I think it's super important for parents to hear this because, like I mentioned before, our kids aren't widgets. You're not teaching. Everyone's different, right? And unique and wonderful. And a lot of parents, I think, are like, oh, standardized tests. You can't standardize my kid. But accountability is huge, right? Like accountability to taxpayers, accountability to parents, accountability to the state and the federal government on we're doing what we say we're doing, and standardized testing is the way that you have to do that. Like there's no real way around it, right? There's different components, but it's a necessary part of accountability, like you would say.
Yeah, and I think it's how we choose to use it. I mean, we're really focused, as Dave said, on that collaborative process and looking at kids student by student and skill by skill, and really ensuring that what's our West Data logo. Today, meeting today's students for tomorrow's challenges or something like that. Preparing. I knew I had the wrong word there.
Only 31 years. You'll get it next year.
I'll get it next year. Yes. But in order to do that, we have to have something that tells us whether or not we're on track to do that. And so I think when we use it in that manner, then we're doing right by the student, and we're doing right by the teacher, and we're doing right by the curriculum, and just all of the stakeholders.
Well, and this may be just too elementary of a question, but how hard is it to get just a full picture of what a student has learned or is learning? How hard is that, Dave?
Well,
I know that's kind of a 30,000 foot question.
I think it depends on who's looking. I think in a classroom, a teacher definitely has an easier view of being able to put all the pieces together.
Sure.
Right? At a district level, that's more of a challenge, because as we said, we don't want, decisions to be made just off of a data score, a score on a spreadsheet. And so having all of the components and parts that really kind of make the whole picture are more of a challenge at the district level to be able to see that. I know that Kelly has been amazing at putting together some processes that really allow for kind of data collection of some of those other pieces when we talk about, behavior and physical health and, social support, and being able to have all of that data so that you can make those decisions at a outside of the classroom level. That's been a focus since she's been here, which has been amazing. It is kind of a challenge at the district level to have that.
Well, I think we always say that it's more than just the score on the paper.
Correct.
You have to. It's really about knowing the student, and so it actually is probably not just one person that can answer that question. Mm-hmm. It's the team that we talked about. It's having the nurse at the table, the counselor, the parent, the student themselves.
Sure.
And are they assessment capable? Yeah. Do they know where they are in their process? Also, what do they feel confident in that they can reproduce or do, or what's holding them back? Mm. So just really embedding all of that in the process is so important. So a spreadsheet's never going to be able to answer that, nor is, the statesman at the end of the year with the results.
Right.
That tells us that's the state accountability, which is necessary, and that is something as district level staff we have to be concerned with.
Of course.
But we want to hold that concern by making sure that in the classroom their focus can be on answering those questions about what students need and what the teacher needs in order to be able to move that learning forward.
Have you? I'm curious if in your years in the district, if you've seen an example of where we do all these different types of testing, district level, classroom, state, and saw a big hole. Like, oh my goodness, the data is showing us we're completely missing this standard or something. Have you seen something like that where we've been able to make like real-time change and kind of correct course?
Yeah, I can speak to something that we did at my former school. The ISAT test has target reports that kind of show you where the bulk of students, the group of students, has shown an area of weakness.
Okay, sure.
Or areas of strength. And of course, we wanted to focus on an area where maybe the results weren't as good as they could be. And it was an informational text writing. And so as a system, so even their social studies teacher, their science teacher, their PE teacher, their band teacher, all of us focused on informational text writing. And after 2 years, unfortunately, the first year we did it was COVID year, so we didn't test, but after the second year, for all students at the school, that changed on the target report from a red to a green for the school. So
it's going to be so gratifying, right? Like you can see it right there.
And that it's not just a math and English kind of thing. It is about the students learning, and that learning can happen at any number of places. And maybe their thing is social studies, but they can learn to write in social studies.
Right.
They can learn to do math in their ceramics class.
Sure.
So really that everybody's bought into the notion that students need to learn. These are important skills for students to take on with them beyond our classrooms. Then everybody's part of the journey and the process and the celebration when it happens for everybody. So
and that's important, right? So we have to celebrate our successes. I mean, we're doing a darn good job in West Ada. I mean, I'm saying this as a parent and seeing, looking at the different data and stuff. So it's.
Well, and this might be a hard question, but you mentioned COVID. I mean, every time I pick up a magazine, y'all, I pick something and I'm reading about, students are so far behind. Is that fair? What have you seen in West Ada? And is that a fair assessment of where the world is now? Dave, you're kind of saying, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that one's tough because we have seen gains in West Ada, from the COVID days to our students performing at levels before COVID.
Right.
And so we feel like that what we're doing is working and getting making up those losses that COVID happened. Unfortunately, what you see in the news doesn't always share that. We can't be the only ones. But that is a challenge. That's always a constant of, COVID. And I think it's going to take a few more years to get it behind us before we stop using that as maybe excuses or reasons why, our students aren't performing, or we get that students aren't performing at levels, because we don't see that in our data, in West Data.
Is there a buy-in element for kids? I have 3 sons, right? Like you just get
mom
get
hat's coming on. Oh yeah,
right? We're always talking during testing season and things like this. Like we're always talking at the dinner table, and I'm trying to like get their buy-in and tell them, your teachers work really hard, your administrator, everyone's working really hard to help educate you. Like this is your opportunity to show what you know. Don't just go in there and be a bonehead and want to click through the test to get done, or it helps with your placement for what classes you're going to be in next year. What do we do? Do we do anything at the building level to kind of get the kids buy-in?
I think that's the most important part. In an ideal world, then you have that intrinsic drive,
right?
And understanding of what it means and what it can mean for you. I think that's a challenge. I mean, 11, 12, and 13-year-olds sometimes don't see the relevance in taking a computerized test, and that's understandable. They've got a lot going on in their worlds, and so when we can make learning visible, which is what we've talked a lot about, and our PD is really centered on that visible learning. And when we can do that, and teachers are able to show how they're using the data today to inform what they're doing today in class and that sort of thing, I think we will get by, and that's a perfect world scenario. That's a lot of work. It's layered work. I mean, it's ongoing preparation from the teacher teams. It's ongoing engagement from the students, and you have the ebb and flow of how that goes in just normal life. So it is a challenge. Schools do have some incentive kind of programs and celebrations that go along with testing, but really the ultimate thing is to show what you know and to celebrate that learning and to feel that kind of internally.
Yeah, that excitement, of being able to demonstrate, what they are able to show and how they can know, what they know. And it's a challenge with kids to get to that. And I think, we see that with adults as well.
Absolutely.
That's
kids and
just
adults.
being a human being, right?
It's exactly that.
So, so those extrinsic, rewards sometimes do come into play.
Discover how Magic School's innovative tools can enhance your child's learning experience from 6 to 7:30 at Centennial High School's Little Theater on February 24th, or 6 to 7:30 at Eagle High School's Auditorium on March 3rd. Connect with educators, explore resources, and unlock the potential of AI in education. Learn from the West Ada School District ITC team about the safe and effective use of artificial intelligence in education. Don't miss out on this exciting opportunity to engage with our school community. We'll see you at Centennial High on February 24th or Eagle High on March 3rd.
Kelly, can you explain to us, I hear this term MTSS, multi-tiered system of support. I've been in education for like 20 years and I don't fully understand that. So can you kind of give our listeners an overview of what MTSS is?
A multi-tiered system of support is really how we function as a school. It's answering the questions of how do we support every student for whatever needs that they might have. Academic, social, emotionally, behaviorally, how do we support our students? And tier 1 is where you would see the majority of students. They are able to receive core best first instruction and with just the regular day in, day out instruction. There is tier 2, which might need additional support in some ways. And there's tier 3, which is a more intensive support. And so a student may be receiving tier 1 level support or level instruction in some areas and tier 2 in others, and just vary anywhere in that system.
Sure.
For whatever it is that they need that support in, whether it's academic, social, emotional, etc.
So like tier 2 might be being pulled out into like different groups, different learning groups to focus on your ELA or your math. I'm thinking like at the elementary level, kids kind of get pulled into different groups. Would that be, or is that still kind of in that tier 1 differentiating instruction? Or?
No, that could be. A lot of times, particularly in elementary, based on how they set up their master schedules, they actually try to embed tier 2 into the day for all students. And so that way they can use that to kind of do their what they call leveled groupings, so identifying needs for individual students. The whole grade level may be participating in a time where they're all receiving instruction in a particular content, but it's leveled based on where they're at.
Okay.
And so they can divide all the students into different groups. So.
Well, and I've always been fascinated, especially with the younger years. It seems like you can have really disparate levels of ability. How hard is that for teachers to that's got to be one of the hardest things. How hard is it for teachers to bring everyone along and
it's
grow?
A lot.
Well,
it is.
As a previous second grade teacher, it's a challenge for sure. When you have students that come, that go from not reading at all to second graders reading at fifth and sixth grade levels, and how do you differentiate their needs throughout the day, all day, on an ongoing kind of thing. And it is a challenge. It's, teaching is hard. And so, you rely on just all of the different tools that you have, but also the support structures that you have in place. So the collaboration that's put into place in the buildings because you can't do it by yourself.
Oh, heck no. Yeah. Well, what does that collaboration look like? I mean, I assume it takes everybody to go okay, here's how we're going to get this person here. What's the collaboration look like? Kelly,
I think that Dave talked about it earlier with the teacher team. So at the elementary level, the grade level team, or at the secondary level, the content area team, meeting to answer the questions of what do I want my students to know? How do I know if they know? What do I do if they do, and what do I do if they don't?
Right.
And so what I've seen is in the secondary, because in the elementary they have that skill time built in. In the secondary, I've seen they have the intervention labs and things, but that's a separate class on the schedule.
Okay, sure.
But teacher teams have been creative. They'll have they'll look at all of their students. They will decide which students need additional support after an assessment, and they will regroup students for a couple of days to have reteaching in one place or enrichment in another place for that class
so
period.
It's a team effort.
It is a team effort.
Yeah.
And it can be challenging to do depending on how complex the master schedule is, but teachers really do answer those questions and look at their individual classroom assessments and common assessments to make decisions about what's next in the classroom. And so they build their instructional calendar to have that flexible time in there.
Golly, that's a lot. That's a lot.
It's a lot. But it's fun to finally give, the students that are struggling, everybody learns at a different rate. And so and that's okay.
Oh, sure. That's just being human. Yeah.
I'm going to get something really quick one time, but the next time it's just not registering. And I just need that extra time to process it. And that's okay.
And it feels so good when you do,
when
right?
You
when you
do.
click and you have those aha moments.
Right.
That's really cool.
Ultimately, that's what we want to happen, is to really embrace the differences of students and allow them their opportunity to grow.
Well, I don't even know how to ask this question, but I'll put a link in the show notes. We've got 6 guiding questions on our website, and I'll put a link in the show notes to where those guiding questions are. But you kind of alluded to that, Kelly.
Yes, for sure.
When students have learned what we expect, I don't really want to go through all the questions, but there's guidelines.
Yeah, for
you
sure.
talked to it a little bit. I mean, Dave, what are the questions? How does that help us have guardrails or guidelines?
Well, that's exactly what they do, right? They provide the guardrail. They provide the banks of the river, as we say, right? If we're everything that we do is focused through those questions, answering those questions, and so when we have that in mind, then we make those decisions, based on how it's going to answer one of those questions. So it really does allow us to kind of keep in mind what we want them to know, how we're going to measure that, and how we're going to respond when they do or don't. And then so that allows the conversations that happen at the district level and the building levels when it comes to bringing a program in or changing curriculum, using a different assessment. I don't know, iReady goes away and we need something else.
Sure.
That's gonna be through the lens of how we evaluate that and how we look at it and say, how is it going to meet our needs? We've identified that these are the questions that are the most important for us to answer as a district.
And as a professional learning community, they're the 4 corollary questions that really focus us on the right work. Why do we exist? Well, we exist to help students learn, and these keep our focus on that, because it's very easy with time limitations to focus on who's making the copies and how are we going to plan for this dance and all of those things that can get in the way. This brings our focus back to how it is that we're going to help students be successful academically. And
this is the goal line. This is
socially
where we're trying to go.
And behaviorally, because we can change all those questions to have that focus of how do we expect our students to behave? How do we, what will we do when they do? What will we do when they don't? So all of those things kind of fit into those corollary questions and really make us a professional learning community.
That's really cool.
I always get sappy, but I just can't, I don't think people comprehend. I get to live in this world all the time, and it still blows my mind that there are so many people who care and are focusing so much on the success of my kid. Yeah. And not just my kid or your kid.
Sure.
Everyone's caring about all these people are putting this time and effort and energy into caring that our kids learn and grow and develop. It's just
that's really cool.
So our kids are so fortunate.
100%. Yeah. Well, and I've got to imagine you all that there are parents out there listening going like, golly, how do I navigate all this? Because you all live in this world. You speak the language of the data. How can we help parents? I assume it's on the building level, but how can we help parents kind of navigate? Oh my gosh, what does this already really tell me about my kid? How do we help parents navigate through all of that?
To me, that's that conversation with the building, with the classroom teacher. If you're looking,
they're probably the conduit, right?
Yeah,
they have to be.
It's like I said earlier about the question that you ask them, not do you have homework, but what is your homework? What are you learning? Yeah. And then is the evidence that I'm seeing from those homework assignments and what I'm doing when I'm helping my student with those homework assignments showing up on the test? Because if I can see at home that they're able to do this math, these math worksheets and the math problems and the worksheets coming back are looking good, and then I get a one or more grade levels below, then that's a question I need to ask. Why did that happen?
Sure.
And so then how can we support the student in that different setting so that they can transfer their knowledge to that different setting? Because that's what they're gonna have to take a college entrance exam at some point. They're gonna have to take a real estate exam at some point. All of those things where you have to transfer your knowledge to a setting that's not natural. So,
but have you learned how to learn?
Have you learned how to learn and troubleshoot and problem solve and critically think along the way? And that's the evidence from the classroom, I think, is the most critical for the parent to be looking at, and then just confirming that with that state and district assessment.
Makes sense.
So really parents need to be proactive in their kids' education, right? And it's okay to reach out to your teacher with questions like, hey, I'm seeing this, but it's not showing up in this testing. Can you help me understand? Or is there something we're missing, something we can work on?
Right. And sometimes that might be as simple as just a motivation that you talked about, and other times it's a fear that we have to help them get through. You'll hear parents and students say all the time, well, I have test anxiety.
Oh, I'm pretty sure everyone has test anxiety.
Everybody has well, some people have interview anxiety.
Podcast guests.
Podcast
exactly.
Like, what are we doing here?
I don't know who that could be.
Right. So you have those situations that you run into in life, and so we have to teach them some. That's the whole child kind of thing that we're talking about. There's more to it than just the test. It's being able to calm yourself and perform
and be able
in
to
the
do
moment
it.
when you need to. Yes,
and but that's teaching too, right?
That is teaching. Yeah.
All right, listen, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm really not. But you spend your days looking at data, figuring things out. What are you seeing that what are the tools that you don't have that you're like, oh gosh, I wish we had?
Ooh, in a perfect world.
I wish we had this tool. Do you see anything like that?
I think there's always opportunity to know more, and I think it goes back to your question about the whole child. Like, how are we looking at all of this other data? Because we have spreadsheets all over the place of testing data, of state assessment data, of our iReady data, and so it's how do we dig deeper and find more information? What behaviorally is happening? What interventions have been put in place that have worked? What interventions have been in place that haven't worked?
Right.
Because I don't want to have to figure that out every year. I want to be able to hold on to that information from one year to the next so that we're not spinning our wheels every year trying to figure out.
And reinventing the wheel every year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've tried to create some systems in our department to collect some of that data, but behavioral and social emotional data is really hard to kind of put in a spreadsheet.
Sure.
But if we have a little bit of that information available and the right people at the table, then you can start having the right kind of conversations that don't stop just at the spreadsheet. And I think that's really what's important to us in our messaging, is that this is the start of a conversation. The data is not the end of the conversation.
Sure.
It's really digging in and asking those individual questions about the student.
Absolutely. And I think, as we talk about those conversations, they have to be honest. Sometimes when we see the numbers, when we see the data on the, we tend to have a tendency to want to rationalize or justify
or explain away or all the things. Sure.
And sometimes, we just need to, be real with it. Like, this is what it's saying. Let's dive in. Let's figure out, what is it telling us, and what do we need to do differently, so that we get a different result. So just being open and honest in those conversations, which sometimes is hard, especially when, someone is looking at your data, and you're having these conversations that are tough, and, it's just a natural tendency. So moving beyond that, we try to approach the information that we have access to and look at, with that kind of open mind of, well, it says one thing, but what is the story behind it? Let's dive into the story behind it.
How does that story get handed off from year to year? I mean, when I was a kid, I remember my mom was a teacher, and I remember your cum file or something even if that's what it was called, and you had a paper file and it had all. What does that look like when second grade is handing off to third grade to make sure that story of this child's being told, and we're not reinventing the wheel every year?
I think that's through the collaborative process. I mean, we have really good systems in place. And the teacher teams at the elementary meet with the next grade level and talk about the students as they're going on. And you kind of have to do that with a little bit of caution, because students grow and mature. And so you want to keep all of that in mind as well. But in the last few years, we've also put in some just teacher recommendation processes between levels, so the fifth grade teachers can communicate something to the sixth grade teachers, because you don't want to waste a couple months in sixth grade trying to figure out some of those things.
Right.
But there are some things that show up in sixth grade that are new, because students do have a level of independence that comes there. So there is the story that needs to get passed along, and there is that opportunity, but then there's also just the normal getting to know you kind of time that happens at the beginning of the year.
That only takes, you have to have time to do it, right?
Absolutely. But the data does follow the student. So, and I think that's been really helpful, because we do have such a robust district system of assessment. So we can see what the longitudinal data says about the student, and that's really important.
It really allows for them to get to that conversation quicker.
Yeah.
They're not having to find the information on the students. They have it at their fingertips, so they can get to those conversations quicker.
Like you said, start the conversation.
Yep.
It's hugely important. Well, I can't thank you enough. I mean, I know that maybe testing can have a lot of anxiety and all kinds of negative connotations around it. But thank you for taking the time to do this. I always say this, but what have we not asked you? What are we missing? Is the conversation complete?
Yeah, did we tell the full story? Are we passing it off?
Anything you want to add before we turn the microphones off?
I guess the only thing you just alluded to is that assessment isn't just a test. It's really our day in and day out. How am I doing? And what do I need to do next? And it's really having that mindset, that growth mindset. And if we think of assessment through that lens, whatever type it is, whether it's a state assessment, district assessment, or me just analyzing where I am in the process, I think that changes the mindset for our learners. And whether that learner is an adult or whether that learner is a student, it changes the mindset, and it changes the attitude towards which matters.
Love it. Because we all should be learning, right?
Yes. All the time. We never stop.
Yeah. Dave, anything on that growth mindset you want to touch on before we say goodbye?
No.
It's just good to grow.
Exactly. I think that exactly sums it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
All right. Thanks.
Well, it really is just interesting how such professionals can drill down on this data and figure out how to help our kids, right?
Well, and it's easy being on the outside and being like, oh, another test. Our kids are doing this assessment. They're doing that assessment. But to hear how much thought and effort and care goes into our kids learning and growing and developing. I mean, it's just, I said it in our conversation, but it really is heartwarming to know that there's so much effort that goes into educating our kids.
Well, and to head off problems before they become
Yes.
problems. I
Yeah.
think it's kind of interesting as a parent to know that as well too, that there's a rhyme behind the reason, or a reason behind the rhyme,
Right.
to figure out what's going on and why.
Yeah, and Dr. Bebb talks a lot about systems, having great systems in
Right.
place, and we need that. We're a huge district. We have a lot of kids, and we have phenomenal systems in place to ensure that our kids are not slipping through the cracks.
Yeah,
and so
big time.
it's just, it was a great conversation. I'm grateful for Kelly and Dave to come on and
Super fun.
share with us.
They were fantastic. And as always, thank you for joining us as well. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon. If you listen on iTunes, please rate us and leave a review. You can also go to YouTube and watch the podcast there as well. Subscribe on the YouTube channel if you don't mind that. And we want to hear from you. Today's question: how do you think assessment and data should be used to support student growth and achievement? And hopefully, you all as listeners have learned a little more today. So we would love to hear from you all. So send us an email, communicate@westada.org. We would love to hear from you all of how you think assessment could
email
be
us,
implemented.
share on social media, all the good things.
Yeah.
And as always, we'll have another awesome podcast episode coming up for you. And this one's really fun. A former member of our team, Jennifer Fletcher. She's the director of recruitment and retention for the district, which is such an important role. And we're so lucky to have someone like Jen kind of leading that charge for our district.
Well, I think, again, as a parent, I didn't know what she did, but to see how she brings in amazing new teachers and retains those teachers.
Really supports them.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
It'll be a good conversation for sure.
Be a lot of fun. Well, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Glad you were here and can't wait till next time.